So today, what I want to discuss is dimensioning, which is really not a verb, but in drafting and design, we kind of consider it to be so. So dimensioning, what do I mean by that? I mean the idea of putting on numbers and dimensions onto our objects to indicate sizes, angles, diameters, anything that a person would need to know in order to be able to manufacture this part. Right now, I have a 3D model of the part. Let me see if I can line it up with my webcam. And this is exactly, there we go, the 3D part that you're seeing on the white doesn't stand out that great, but what you're seeing for the drawing on the screen. And this happens to be a scaled version of this drawing. At any rate, this is you could say, well, this is a beautifully constructed, beautifully done drawing. It tells me everything about the shape from the top view, the front view, and the right side view, with the exception of the fact that I forgot to go ahead and put my my labels on those two views. So let me go ahead and do that. And this is something you might actually have to move around when you're all said and done dimensioning. You're possibly moving your labels around, but this would be the right orientation of showing the drawing when it's completed. The front view, think about like if you had a fold line, right, like in origami. Let's just say that this was a line, right, meaning if I folded the right over this object, it comes on the right, and the same on the top. Okay, so over here, the representation of the object in a perspective view is easy enough to see, and we just kept it on graph paper. We said, okay, if you count across here, it's 6 units one way, 4 units the other way. Well, now we need to express that on each view. Okay, first thing I want you to do, or if you're using dimensions, if you're using this on your own, what I would do is create a dimension layer right here. And I've already created one on my template file. So what would happen there is you would just select dimension. And now anything that I put, any content I put on the screen will be on our dimension layer. And the reason I would do that is sometimes when we add a lot of dimensions to this, see, I don't have any dimensions on, but you can see by turning it off, I was able to just go ahead and see the view itself unobstructed. Okay, so very easily up here on this annotation tab to the right of the text A, right here we have one thing, an icon that says dimension, and this is for linear dimensions. Very easy to use. If we want to find the length of something or to indicate the length of something, I just click it once and read your command window down at the bottom, but it just says select object or specify first extension line or whatever. So all I do is I pick one end of the object, I swing over this way, and I grab the other endpoint of the object. Now, with these extension lines, which are the right and left ends of the object, I can extend it down, extend it up, place it wherever I want to. Okay, so I'll just click that there. So easy as that. Click the dimension tab, and this is for a linear dimension, meaning anything that's in a straight line. Okay, so I click the two endpoints, one endpoint and the other endpoint, and I can drag them in, I can drag them out. Piece of cake. Now, a couple of rules of thumb when you're dimensioning, and we'll get to how to dimension angles and a couple other things later. I'm going to show how to do a radius as well as a circle. Those are the common ones that you need to know. Rules of thumb with dimensioning, sort of like writing at a certain point. The idea is be succinct. You want to say everything you need to say, but you don't need to say it more than once. Just like, in elementary school, you were probably, people were challenged to write a 3 or a 5-page paper, or middle school, and they said, oh, it's so long and whatever. And we stretched our words to say things sometimes 2 and 3 times. Now we want to go ahead and minimize, and we want to only say it once. So in other words, this doesn't make any sense, right, to put 6 and 6 right here because they're the same length. We know that. We can imply that, okay? The same thing applies right here. Even though this is a different view, I would not put 6 right here because we know it's already 6. Okay, so we have to assume a certain level of intelligence about the person who is going to interpret our drawing, but don't assume everything because they may have some difficulties. Okay, couple of things now we need to know. If I and the other, I guess, rule of thumb I would say is try to not, what I would suggest is like this front view to me is the most telling as far as the overall shape of the object. So what I would do in this instance is try to avoid overly dimensioning the view that has the most the most detailed view. Okay. I need to know a couple of things here. So what did I do? I took this as a width of 6 from there. And so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and dimension the depth. So this is from the front of the object, right, to the back of the object. And I'm going to say that that is 4. And now what I'm going to do is right click enter. And by the way, if you just keep hitting spacebar once you're done with the command, it'll bring that same command back. I need to know the height of the object, okay, which is 4. Now, look what's happening right now. It says 4.13. What do you suppose is happening? Well, if I look right here, I'm actually grabbing the end of the extension line, not the drawing. So the more dimensions you get on there, be careful that you are drawing that. So in this case, I have an angle, and if I can give a person an angle measure versus a starting point, I would always rather give a starting point. In this case, I'm going to probably give both. But instead of keeping the, you don't want these dimensions to stay. We want to try to avoid dimensioning inside the object. We don't want to straddle the object. We don't want it so close. We want to give the person a good view of what the original object is. Now, in this case, I'm going to bring this way out here to show that if I click this, I can come back, grab this grip, and I can edit it and move it back in and out. Okay. Well, in this case, what I want to do is I want to dimension also, I'll do it the backwards way first. I want to dimension the space from here to this notch. So in this case, I would say, okay, I want to go from here to here. But see now how my 1-inch line, or my 1-inch dimension, it's on the outside of my 4-inch dimension. And that may not seem like a big deal to some people, except that now I have all this crisscrossing right here and it's starting to look confusing. This is what we would refer to as a stacked dimension. And with a stacked dimension, I want to always put the largest number on the outside and the smallest number on the inside. So what I'm going to do is just reverse those, which I could do after. And now I might want to give a little more room between the 4 and the leader arrow right here with the 1. I would also need to tell the person that that's happening on the other side as well, right? That the distance from here to here is also 1. So now a person that's manufacturing this or laying this out or programming a machine could easily, instead of having to know an angle, they could say, okay, if I come up 1 here, down 1 here, and connect the dots, that will mark the angle. One other thing that we would want to know on this, actually, I'll come back to this angle in a minute. We'll use that with specific dimension types, okay? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull this dimension down a little bit. And the reason I'm going to do that is I want to go ahead and show a person that if I come to this portion on this right side, that's in 2. This is also in 2, and this is also 2 between here. So I have a couple of options. One thing I could do is just say, okay, from there to there is 2, and I could drag that down. At the same time, I could have said that this middle portion was 2. Now, again, kind of with this general rule of thumb, if we assume a certain intelligence of people who are interpreting our drawings, if we don't tell them anything else, if we only tell them that this is 6 and this portion is 2, we can assume we're relying on the assumption that the space in here between this point and this point, between this point and this point, and this point and this point are also all 2. If this was something different, we would tell them. Okay, so it's kind of like, hey, if I want something different, I'm going to let you know. All right. Front to back, I don't need to dimension this because this is already dimensioned right here. I don't need to dimension height over here because this is already dimensioned over here. In fact, I don't even need to measure the distance between this and this because that's already done. However, I do need to tell the person in the back that this is also important. That's a distance of 1. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is the last portion of this is show the angular dimensions. So I have 2 angles that are formed, one between here, and the other one on this side. And I can place them wherever I want. Now in this case, the dimension is going to go inside the object. So how do I get to dimension an angle? If I look up here to the right of the dimension icon that you've been using, to the right of it on the very top, I have a small one with a drop down. It looks almost the same, but it has a drop down arrow. This is where I find those other specific types of dimensions. The ones that you'll use in perspective drawing will be aligned. In a lot of different types of drawings, we use angular. We also use radius. And we also use diameter. Diameter I always use for circles. Radius I always use for curves. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to check angular. So again, how to get there, hit the drop down, come down to angular. This couldn't be simpler. All you have to do is it says select arc, circle, line. The directions aren't great in the command window. Select 2 lines that make up the angle. So I know this one makes up the angle and that one makes up the angle. Now it'll give you its complementary and supplementary angles, right, and everything else. I can play around with how I do this. That seems to me to be a silly way to measure it. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 63 degrees right here, and I can change the format of how it dimensions it. Whichever one you feel like suits you or is least, this right here, I don't know if I like that. I sort of like having it that way. To me, is more helpful. And then on this one, I have 2 options. So again, and note right here that if you look at this icon, it defaults to the last one you used. So all I have to do is click this, click this, click this, and in this case, I would side with that at 76 degrees. All right. So that's everything you need to know about dimensioning right there, with the exception 2 other things really quick. If I wanted to dimension the diameter of this circle, click the drop down, come on down to the circle, click it, and you have a leader that flexes and moves with you. So you can position this anywhere you want. Don't ever position them this way or this way. It's kind of bizarre. You're better off to go ahead and drop it like that. Okay. Same with the radius. So certain dimension, um, we're going to always use diameter for circles. And then for a radius, which is just a curve, I have that same functionality. I can move it around, and that's it. One click. All right. That is dimensioning.